Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am once again building in the world of Fallout. If you haven't seen my past couple of videos, I've been building lore behind each of those and thought it would be fun to build some more storyline along with making something by hand. I don't have a lot of time to get this video out with birthdays and severe weather and other issues this past week. I've had limited time in the shop to actually build stuff, so that's my game plan. I looked at a couple of assets and decided that I would build a fusion core. If you're not familiar with Fallout, this is what powers the vaults, and it also powers the power armor suits. So it is definitely an integral part into the world of Fallout, so let's make one out of EVA pretty quickly. Let's get to building. This is going to be a relatively simple build that I'm making up as I go. The basic concept is this: get a big 48mm EVA dowel and wrap layers of foam around it to add dimension. Then carve back, burn out, or add thinner foam to create details. If you enjoy Fallout, I have a playlist on my channel of 45 other builds that might interest you. I found a good 3D model of the fusion core on a website called Sketchfab. They're not a sponsor, but I use them all the time to find reference image sources in 3D. I'm also going to continue my own fan story that I've done with the 3 videos I mentioned in the intro. I'll pepper in some story in between my instructions, so grab your Brahmin milk and get ready for a little bit of spice on this prop making build. To catch you up on our story, Vault Much Props was a vault tech experiment where 2 creative makers were tricked into making cosplays for the Enclave to infiltrate cities within the wasteland and take them over from the inside. Our skilled makers eventually figured out this ploy and are now on an epic journey to right their wrongs, one post-apocalyptic settlement at a time. So far, they have exposed spies in both Goodneighbor and Far Harbor. In this episode, our duo is back on the mainland of the Commonwealth, working their way back to Diamond City, a large settlement made from an old baseball stadium. As the vault dwellers transverse the desolate roads leading back to the well-protected Diamond City, they pick up a distress signal on their Pip-Boy. Intrigued by the voice, they begin to head in the direction of the broadcast. Once my 8mm EVA foam is glued to the 48mm EVA dowel, I need to taper off the top and round off the bottom. I'm going to do a bulk of this removal with a sanding drum on my rotary tool. I draw a line where I want the taper to go to and then just work my way around the cylinder. When I am done shaping, I smooth out the taper with a piece of sandpaper glued to a piece of wood to kind of level out all those marks, and then switch over to a stone bit to smooth that over. Basically, each pass is just removing the lines left before by the bit being used. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area. You don't want to breathe in the dust particles. I use the same technique to make the finger pulls and other details on the fusion core. The distress signal leads our heroes to an industrious-looking building according to the Pip-Boy known as Sagus Ironworks. This large building was surrounded by raiders and did not seem like a place that was very welcoming to outsiders. As our costume makers got close to the fortified establishment, they could hear 2 raiders talking. Eager to learn more about the building and get to the bottom of this distress signal, they listened quietly in a bush just shy of the watch post. They talked about the leader of the group, who they referred to as Slag, and how he was tricking local farmers into joining their crew by putting out a false distress signal. His recent convert was a young kid named Jake from Finch Farms, not too far away. Slag had tricked him into stealing his dad's pre-war sword and bringing it back as an initiation fee for joining. On the bottom of the fusion core are these two cylindrical prongs. I'm assuming these are like connection points to the fusion generator or a plug-in on the power armor. I used an 18mm EVA dowel as the shape. I burrow a hole into the build and then glue the two prongs into the recess. Back to our eavesdropping cosplay makers in the bush. One of the raiders starts talking about Slag's impressive Raiders power armor and how much he would love to find his own. As the words Raiders power armor echo in the Vault Dwellers' ears, a light bulb clicks in their heads. We should probably check the binder. The binder, of course, referring to the list of Enclave spy costumes that they have built. As they thumb through the book, there on page 76 was a big picture and dossier of a Raider power armor set. This build was for the leader of a group that collectively went by the Forged. So basically I'm doing the same steps as the lower body of the fusion core, but with some 10mm foam this time. I cut the top closer to the final size once it is glued on, and then go through the same steps shaping it with various bits. The hardest part was carving in the recesses on the top. I would recommend practicing this on another piece of scrap foam to get comfortable with doing. For our costume building vigilantes, they are very uncomfortable with a task that is in front of them. This build was one of the most technical builds of all the years they spent in the vault. They had to make this costume impervious to extreme heat, so they built this suit almost indestructible. As their brains were stumped, a grumble in the stomach of one of our builders had him rummaging through his knapsack in the dark for a quick snack. The pull recess on the body of the fusion core have these little strips, which one could assume is to allow for a nice grip to aid when removing the device from its base. I cut up strips of 2mm foam, shaped them to the desired look, and then super glued them into place. I do the same thing for the ridges on the top and the little dial looking thingy that's on the top in the middle. As our hungry hero fumbles through his bag in the dark, he pulls out what he thinks is a nice energy drink, only to find that it is a fusion core. His search for food has led him to a possible solution to the ordeal. Power armor suits drain through one of these cores in about 10 to 15 hours. The connection for the excitement may not be obvious yet, but you know that this is no ordinary fusion core in the hands of our hero. It has a special chip integrated seamlessly into its construction. Instead of cutting out different panels of the design, which would have required planning ahead of time, which I don't really do that often, I'm going to burn in some of the details with a wood burner. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a ventilated area. The fumes of burning foam are nasty and you don't want to breathe them in. Back to our story. With the fusion core in hand, the two vault dwellers come up with a plan to infiltrate the heavily guarded facility of heat-obsessed raiders. The two step out into the open with their hands up. Yep, that was the plan. Get caught. The outer perimeter guards see 2 Vault Tech suits with bags on them and know the potential for good loot is at hand. Just before they're about to open fire, one spots the fusion core in the hand of their new hostages and immediately escorts the 2 to Slag. Fusion cores are hard to come by in the wasteland, and Slag has always insisted that anyone captured with one needs to be interrogated. Just like with the wood burner and the sand drum, I'm carving in recesses to look like screws, bolts, and other details on the core. Removing the chuck from the rotary tool has a perfect size diameter for some details. As our vault dwellers are being escorted to their doom, they're oddly calm, telling their escort that they'll be safely delivered from the evil of their leader by Vault Tech. Unfazed, they led the 2 directly to Slag, standing in front of a large, bubbling pit of molten metal, the old crucible of the Sagas factory still glowing hot after all these years. Slag makes all kinds of idle threats and gives our 2 visitors an opportunity to live. He says they gotta give over the supplies, their fission cores, and pass a couple of forge initiations that they'll talk about later. With a smile, the 2 agree, and Slag swaps out his old fusion core for the new one the Vault Dwellers had. Two coats of plasti dip. The paint scheme is pretty simple for a fusion core, just like Wiz Khalifa says, black and yellow, black and yellow. I mask off the top with painter's tape and spray the bottom yellow with a couple of different shades. Back to Slag. Now fully powered, he pulls out a pre-war shish kebab sword and swings it around like a 5-year-old playing with a new toy. Our Vault Dwellers laugh as one of them looks down at their Pip-Boy. What Slag doesn't know is that fusion core is equipped with an interesting feature. During their build of hundreds of various costumes for the Enclave, they always had a problem with powering suits. So with a quick modification to a fusion core, they could power any suit. And as one could assume, power armor suits are heavy. So when they would build some heavy cosplay for their unbeknownst persons, they used a special fusion core that had a remote control pickup wired into the device. This device was controlled with an app. The Vault Dweller opens his Pip-Boy up, pushes a button, and Slag involuntarily drops his sword. The rest of the details were painted on by hand. The small dial on the top and the bolts and some connection prongs have a nice sword blade silver. Speaking of sword blades, Slag's shish kebab hits the floor and everyone stands in disbelief. With one button push, the 2 captured Vault Dwellers have disarmed one of the most ruthless villains in all of the wasteland. Slag screams at his gang to take down our heroes, but before the Forged can move a muscle, another button is pushed, and Slag takes a step backwards towards the molten hot lava. The gang, frozen in fear, stares at their leader as he calls them cowards and all kinds of swear words, then directs his verbal assault to the vault dwellers, saying that they will die once he gets out of this suit. His heels are now backed to the edge of the forge, and the costume builder pushes a button to give him his wish. The back panel of the suit swings open, tips backwards, and the villain known as Slag is ejected into the flames of the Ironworks crucible. As one last touch to tie this prop back into my story, I'm going to add my Vault Boy sticker to the back of this fusion core. Refer back to my previous build stories to get its significance. It's just a pic of a prop I made, printed onto some sticky paper and measures about 2 inches wide, and I sealed it up with Mod Podge. As for our heroes, the forged with no leader drop to their knees and beg for their lives from the button-pushing costume makers. Our protagonist explains to the brainwashed raiders about Slag's true intentions as an enclave spy, and they all vow to disperse back to their families and put the fires behind them. Not wanting to have to constantly power up this armor, they remove the battery from the armor just in case they may need it later, kick the armor into the fire, and slap a sticker onto the back of the fusion core. On their way out of the building, they set the Sagas Ironworks ablaze to deter any other raiders that may want to return. And with that, our vault dwellers have undone another evildoer, and this prop maker has made another epic Fallout prop. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, not too bad. Very straightforward, very quick. Not something that was too terribly difficult. Now, there are certain parts of it that could be done differently. The carving of things in may make you a bit nervous, but it's also a great way to get some practice in. And with the world of Fallout, if you ding it up or scratch it, it can always just be weathering and aged battle damage appropriate things. But yeah. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to make something from the game that ties it all in some way and makes you want to play it even more. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some... Yay! And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. I better go put this back in its spot before the vault dwellers notice. Peace out. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.